Hello, Raider Nation, and welcome to the Believe in Raiders podcast. I'm Dennis Ackerman, pleased to be joined by former Raider great Stanford Routt. He's also the current quarterbacks coach for Valpo football. And Stan, obviously, the big news on Tuesday was the Raiders trading Pro Bowl star wide receiver Davante Adams to the New York Jets. The Raiders received a third rounder for him, which turns into a second rounder if he's on the roster and the Jets make the AFC title game or a Super Bowl, or he's a first or second team All-Pro. So I'm pretty sure it's just going to remain a third rounder. Stan, what is your assessment of this deal for the silver and black?
I think it's probably about the best deal that they were going to be able to make, just for the compensation they were able to get in return. Obviously, they didn't want to pay the rest of Devontae's salary and things like that. So anytime the financial, the money aspect starts becoming a factor, that's when now you just want to get the best deal that you possibly can take. And that's what it appears that they were able to get. Obviously, Davante wanted to go play with his former teammate and Aaron Rodgers. So it seemed like that was the best deal that was on the table for the Raiders to make, because it started becoming more and more apparent that he had already played his last days, or should I say his last game, in the black and silver uniform.
Stan, let me ask you this: as a former player, 8 years in the NFL, I mean, it's clearly he was the Raiders' best player. Well, 1A, 1B with Max Crosby. I mean, if you're a current Raider and you see one of your two best players walking out that door, how does that make you feel moving forward with the rest of the season? I mean, I know they're professionals, I know they get paid, but there's a heck of a lot more to it than just that.
Well, obviously, it just goes to show that as a player, you know that the team is not trying to win the Super Bowl this year. I think that we both can all agree with that assessment as far as just looking at it if you're a current player. But then again, were the Raiders actually, or should I say, are the Raiders a championship caliber team right now? We both can agree it's a resounding no. So as a player, you know what it is. Obviously, you don't want to necessarily see that, but you know what it is. The team is in more of a retooling, rebuilding mode. But if you don't have a quarterback, or you don't have a settled star quarterback, or somebody who you know is going to be your franchise guy for the next 10 to 12 years, you're going to be spinning your wheels anyway. So as a player, you don't want to see it. You don't necessarily want to hear it, but you know that that is the confirmation that the team is not trying to win the big one this season.
All right, let's stay on. Well, you talked about the money. Let's kind of take a look at it right now. Here are the numbers. The Raiders do have a dead cap hit for 2024 as well as 2025. It's 13.67 million, or just under 14 for this season, and just under 16 for 2025. It's 15.7. The Jets are on the hook this year for his remaining 11.59. 11.2 of that is guaranteed. The next 2 years, it's non-guaranteed. Davante Adams is scheduled to make $36.25 million. Let me ask you this. I mean, just looking at it from a different perspective from the Jets, is this guy just a rental? I mean, at his age, Davante is going to be 32, I believe, in December. Is he worth that kind of money the next couple of years from your perspective, looking at what he's done?
I think that it's just going to come down to exactly what the Jets really, really see while he's playing for them for the remainder of the season. Just because if they wind up actually being able to right the ship, him and Aaron seem like they have the same magic that they had in their days at Lambeau Field playing for the Packers, then I could very well see the Jets possibly picking up that rest of that non-guaranteed contract and having him be a Jet for another couple of years. Just because we look right now with the top spot for receiver salary, and I think it's Justin Jefferson.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Contract that he signed a couple months ago, paying him 34, 35 a year, highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history. And that's, I think, like I said, 35, I think, or something like that. I think CeeDee Lamb is right behind him at 34 and change. So to hear that Davante Adams making 36 million next season isn't something that's completely baffling. It's not something that's completely just out of whack, because we all can agree that if you don't like him, you still would put him in your top 5 receivers.
Agreed. Agreed. Kind of like you were talking about, Stan, in the long run, and I'm not talking short term. Let's look at the big picture here for the Raiders. As you said, the trade definitely opens up some much needed cash for them that frees up a chunk of salary cap space for next season. The current Raiders, as you said, Stan, this roster is not a Super Bowl roster. It's not even a playoff roster. I'm not even sure if it's a 500 roster the way they've been playing through these first 6 games. So getting a second day pick and unloading salary, it really is a win for the Raiders, don't you think? Just long term.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Just because we saw that Davante Adams was getting very frustrated.
Yes.
We saw the rumblings, heard the rumblings, even going back to the offseason, things like that. We talked ad nauseum about how are they going to keep Davante Adams happy. Well, clearly they weren't going to be able to do that. So once you see that a player is disgruntled, you might as well get something for him. You don't want him to just walk away and you get nothing for him. So once that's established, now it's just simply mitigating your losses, trying to figure out what's the best type of situation, the best type of transaction that we can have. And like you just said, being able to get a day 2 pick, if obviously everything goes according to plan with him over there with the New York Jets, that's all you can hope for. And just you got to use that, take that, and try to go ahead and build out your roster.
All right, let's get our promo read in here. And Bet Online is always your sports information headquarters this season, as we have you covered for all your sports wagering needs. We got basketball, MLB, NHL hockey, right to UFC and boxing. Bet Online is the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info, including live betting options and your favorite casino and card games you can play right from your home. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Be sure to use our promo code BLEAV to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet Online, where the game begins. All right, Stan, also on Tuesday, the NFL approved Tom Brady's bid to buy a minority stake in the Raiders. Brady's deal was initially approved back in 2013, but took 17 months to get approval. And then also, Stan, I didn't even realize this. Former Raider Richard Seymour was approved to purchase a minority stake in the team as well, so good for him. And Stan, there's been a lot of reports out there that Tom Brady, he's going to be very active and have a prominent voice in the operation of this team. Let me ask you this. How much of a voice do you think Brady will have in Mark Davis's ear when it comes to football decisions?
That remains to be seen. I think that he would have a fair amount of Mark Davis's ear when it comes to football decisions. You don't have somebody who's the best player in NFL history, or should I say with the most Super Bowls, the top guy. You don't have him on the board of directors per se and not actually go ahead and take any of his input. It's not like Tom Brady grew up playing for the Raiders. It's not like he grew up and he won the majority of his Super Bowls with the Raiders or anything like that. Obviously he probably was a fan of them growing up along with the 49ers because he's from the Bay Area. But anytime you have somebody like that you've as the owners approved to have a minority ownership within the black and silver, I think that that's something that you're not going to take that lightly. You're going to make sure that you go ahead and make him feel like he's heard, like his opinions are welcome. So I don't see Tom Brady being out there necessarily choosing a draft pick, but definitely somebody, whenever he speaks, you are going to heed to the type of advice or at least the opinion that he gives whenever he's on those conference calls or just in that boardroom.
Yeah, Mark Davis better listen, because based on his track record, Stan, as a team owner, the Raiders appear like they're heading towards another losing season. They've made the playoffs just twice since he took over the team. No playoff victory, Stan. And, Mark's always been frank in that he doesn't have the football acumen that his dad, Al, did. Stan, Mark was around the team when you were playing for them. Did you know him? I mean, what was I don't know if you had any kind of relationship for him. It was just kind of cordial, but what were your kind of thoughts being around Mark, however often you were during your playing days with the Raiders?
Well, yeah, he was around, obviously, but as a player, you don't try to ingratiate yourself with the family of ownership, or should I say your boss, that much. We just all looked at him as the boss's son. And everybody knows, like what you just said, Mark Davis has already intimated how he's not as ingratiated, he's not as ingrained as his dad, the late great Al Davis, was. But he's somebody that still obviously enjoys football, somebody that's a fan. But, I think that he's well aware that he's not somebody that is entrenched into the Raiders like Al Davis was. And that's why he's attempted to go and get John Gruden. He's attempted to get a Josh McDaniels. He now obviously has settled on a Antonio Pierce for his head coach and things like that. And with the Tom Brady now being one of the part owners, because he's trying to go ahead and get the ship righted. So he knows that he's not as in tune as Al Davis was. But you know what? Let me go ahead and try to get some of these better football minds in the building. I can go and pick their brain and try to learn something from them, get them a part of the brain trust and things like that. So obviously we see that it hasn't worked out yet, but Mark Davis is trying to get everything going in the right direction.
He certainly is. Let's hope he does with this one. Stans, here's what I thought was a little bit interesting. Now, talking about Tom Brady, the broadcaster. Now, since he's become minority owner in the Raiders, the league is banning him when he does his broadcasting, his analysis work for Fox. They're banning him from all facilities, production meetings, and practices for the games he works for Fox. Now, Stan, I know you were a college football analyst. I do play-by-play. I mean, how good can Brady be? I mean, that's a lot of access that you're getting denied. I mean, yes, you have your game notes and things like that, but I got to imagine it's going to make his job hell of a lot harder trying to be an analyst, not having that kind of access when it comes to his broadcasting.
Yeah, absolutely. Just because, and being somebody that's been a part of the broadcasting, being somebody who's been, like you just said, a color analyst for ESPN for a number of years, that's something that's going to be so difficult to be able to navigate, because for the NFL side, they want to make sure that they don't show any level of impropriety. They want to make sure that they don't show any level of, quid pro quo or anything that's like some underhanded, under the table dealings, things like that, because you now have somebody who's an owner of an NFL team, part owner, minority owner, but an owner of an NFL team who's now also going to be calling games. They're going to be a part of that process with the insider information that the public doesn't know, being in those buildings, having those production meetings. So those certain little nuggets that he could then possibly go and take back to the Las Vegas Raiders and things like that. So I think the NFL banning him from being inside of any of the facilities and things like that, they want to show that there's not going to be any level of impropriety and things like that, just because they want to make sure that their backside is covered. That way there's no even hint of somebody that could possibly be betting on football. You look at the now late great Pete Rose, who obviously was banned from baseball for a lifetime just because of betting on it, things like that. So the NFL wants to make sure that they appear on the up and up. And then, yeah, it definitely probably will have a little bit of an effect, because once again, so much. And I remember being a player sitting in these meetings where it's the game of the week, and you have the color analyst and the play-by-play guy that come to the facility and watch practice that Friday. They have a lot of the top players go to the production meeting. They interview you, ask you certain questions and things like that. So it definitely will have a bit of a hit on his preparation, but I still think he'll be able to go ahead and knock it out the park as far as the actual production itself, whenever he's being that color analyst during the game, in the booth, things like that, because that level of expertise, whether he's in the building doing the production, preparation, and things like that, he's still going to be able to go ahead and have a great wealth of knowledge. But yes, it will be a little bit different preparing for the game. But as far as the actual production itself, him being able to actually go out there and produce whenever the ball is kicked off and the lights turn on, he'll be just fine.
Stan, last question for you. Now that we've moved on from Davante Adams, he's now a New York Jet. We know the Raiders are in rebuild mode. Are we looking at this season in terms of wins or losses, or are we looking at this season in terms of how our younger players are progressing, like a Brock Bowers, a DJ Glaze, Jackson Powers Johnson, guys like that? Is that what we're looking at now? And if, hey, we get a win, we get a W, but it's more about let's see how these young guys that we've taken, how they progress throughout the season.
I think so, just because last year we saw how Josh McDaniels was fired promptly right after the Detroit Lions thrashing on Monday Night Football. So then I would say, okay, let's see how the team responds to an Antonio Pierce. And we wound up going, 5-4 down the stretch. He wound up getting the interim tag taken off of his back, and now he's the full-time head coach. Well, now we're going from Davante Adams to now who's going to be the next guy to step up, who's going to be our number one guy going forward. So there's going to be a lot remain to be seen as far as the remainder of the season. How is this team going to gel, especially within the receiving corps? Who's going to gravitate? Who's going to propel themselves to be in that top spot? Is it going to be Brock Bowers? Is it going to be some receiver that we didn't expect to have a big season coming into this year because we thought Davante was going to get the lion's share of all the targets and things like that? So it's going to be, once again, another season of seeing how everything goes, seeing how everybody matures, who's going to emerge as the top guy, and then go from there and then try to attack this thing again hard next all season in free agency, the draft, things like that.
Stan, I lied. I looked up something the other day and I could not believe it. I was wondering where Hunter Renfrow was playing this season. Do you know who he's playing for?
I think I have a really good guess.
Go ahead.
I think Hunter Renfrow is playing for the same team that I'm playing for this season.
You are correct.
Yeah.
Stan, I am dumbfounded how a guy who a few years ago had over 1,000 yards receiving is not playing in the NFL. That is just a complete head scratcher. I thought it was a mistake when I looked it up. I was like, this has got to be wrong. And then lo and behold, no one picked him up. I just could not believe that. I just thought this guy is talented. I still think he's a good route runner. I still think he could help a team, but for whatever reason, he is on the unemployment line in the NFL, which was a complete head scratcher and a big surprise to me as well. So,
yes.
Anyways, just wanted to throw that one in there at the very, very end. All right, Raider Nation, that's going to do it for another edition of the Believe in Raiders podcast presented by betonline.ag. For my partner, Stanford Route, I'm Dennis Ackerman. Thanks so much for listening, and may all your punts find the coffin corner.